If you want to break the wall, you can get a Roman numeral 2, which is a score multiplier. So if getting a high score is your main goal of the Castlevania game, getting the multipliers are essential to accomplish that goal. Once you get a hold of the Holy Water sub-weapon, which I have now, I really recommend holding on to it because it's going to make the next boss battle extremely easy. The next boss will go down in just a second or two with the Holy Water, and without it, it may be a little bit tricky to actually defeat this boss. This is actually our last room, right before the boss. Thankfully, they give us a health item in case you need it, in the right wall. Be careful of that skeleton knight just so that you don't lose any health right before the boss, and if you have the Holy Water, go to the far left of the platform, jump, and start throwing Holy Water. You'll see that the boss goes down in only 1 or 2 seconds total, which definitely makes this boss extremely easy, but without that Holy Water, this boss can be a little bit of a pain. After we defeat the boss, Grant transforms back into his normal form, and you can actually get him to join you now. Grant is definitely a really cool overall character and gives some of the levels a different aspect, because Grant can actually climb on walls. Now you actually have to replay the clock tower level now, but actually you're going from now the top back down to the bottom. So it's a different perspective, but it's still essentially the same level, as it's basically now falling apart. I'm going to transform into Grant and show off some of his abilities. Walking on ceilings and walking on walls gives Grant the ability to really cut down on certain parts of the level. Maybe not as much as Alucard with his flight ability, but it's still pretty good and really cool to see. As you may have noticed though, Grant does have a little bit of a downside. His range attack is very limited. Only a small little knife to stab at enemies, and it's not going to necessarily do a whole lot of damage to some of the bigger enemies and may put you into harm's way. But with his speed, the ability to climb on walls, and his overall better jumping than most of the characters in the game, Grant's a great character for getting through levels quickly. Just not exactly the best for fighting the bosses at the end of those levels. Thankfully, working our way back down the clock tower doesn't take nearly as long as climbing back up it, as you can see how much of the level I was actually able to skip by falling from different ledges. I wouldn't necessarily attempt those falls on your very first try of the game, but after a try or two and you kinda got the layout a little bit, trying these little shortcuts is definitely fun, especially when they pay off. As we reach the end of the level, fall off the ceiling, and Grant slowly walks over to the door. Now before we actually go into the Mad Forest with Trevor and Grant, I'm going to show you now what would have happened if I decided just to go to the Mad Forest instead of going to the clock tower at all. You may have noticed that the map had actually changed when I went to the clock tower, but this is actually the direct path that the map originally, I guess, had wanted us to take. In this level, you can see a staple of the Castlevania series returning again, the different types of falling platforms with spikes on that are instant deaths. Thankfully, the first couple, though, I just run very fast underneath of them before any of them can hit me. Those skeletons that have the whip have a very long range, so it's best to attack them first before they're even able to get their whip out. Once you climb these stairs, however, that's actually the end of the part that we wouldn't have done with Grant. So now I'm going to switch over back to Trevor and Grant and continue the mad farce, exactly where I just left off with Trevor. These owls in this farce are a pain in the butt, but since Grant has an extremely high jumping ability, that, along with picking up the axe sub-weapon, which was laying right there in one of those containers, this is an easy area as long as you attack all the owls before they can really start swooping at you. Maybe not as annoying as some flying enemies that have been in past games, not only Castlevania, but like maybe the eagles from Ninja Gaiden, but they are definitely a pain. Thankfully, we don't really have to fight them here with any major pits to fall back into. Ah yes, the Fleamen, also as imps in some other Castlevania games, essentially the same enemy. One of the most absolutely annoying enemies in the history of Castlevania. But with Grant, he's thankfully so low to the ground that he just stabs him right in the face and gets a little bit of the revenge that we've all been seeking with those Fleamen. Down here as we enter this door is actually the end of the level. It's one of those levels that doesn't end with a boss battle. But here is our second of the two branching paths. Now the first one I'm going to take is actually the top path, which will actually get us our second of our friends, Sypha. Now you can only have one of the companions at a time, so if you decide to take Sypha, you end up losing Grant. But I'll show how to get Sypha, and then I'll actually go to the swamp area, which I didn't choose here, and show the path to actually get the third companion, Alucard. These jellyfish monsters are probably one of my most hated enemies when I was growing up. I always had a hard time hitting them. But with Grant, I found it was pretty much the easiest way to get over them because you can move so much quicker with Grant than you can with Trevor. Jumping over them and trying to dodge those jellyfish is probably the best strategy of getting past them quickly. These spider enemies are easy to take care of. When they descend, if they stay down for too long, they will fire a little tiny spider in your general direction, relatively easy to dodge. However, the bad thing about them is they are a respawning enemy, so even though when you take one out, a few seconds later another one may pop down from the ceiling. For our next boss battle, where we actually will get Sypha, I'm going to switch back to Trevor because it's a lot easier to take out this Cyclops type enemy with Trevor. Hit him once or twice anytime he drops his hammer, and then run to the opposite side of him and try to get to the ledge so that you can quickly jump over his head. If you destroy the left ledge where a piece of food was, it's going to be tough to get back up there. If you want to use Grant for that ability, you may want to, switching back and forth between the two, but I find that as long as you have a good amount of health, as well as pick up that turkey, you should have no problem getting past the Cyclops enemy. And if you didn't enjoy him enough, we will be seeing him quite a lot throughout this run. There was actually two big errors right there in Sypha's little dialogue. Sypha is actually a female, and we'll notice at the ending with Sypha that we'll see her long flowing blonde hair, as it was referred to that she was actually a him in this translation. Also, it said that it was spelled S-Y-F-A, but in the Japanese version and in canon, it's actually spelled S-Y-P-H-A. I switch back to Trevor now, my Trevor-only run, and head down into the swamp, where I'll be heading towards Alucard's location. We'll be joining up with Trevor and Sypha later on in the run. These frogs are a big pain in the butt. Not only are they constantly jumping out of the swamp water, But when you're in the swamp itself, you move extremely slowly, and the only way to move is by quickly jumping in that swamp water. As soon as one of those frogs jumps out, immediately hit them with the whip. And when you go down here, just head to the right and bypass the swamp monster as well as that frog. In this area, take out the bat or jump over it, then wait for the platform to come over to you and then jump on the moving platform just so that you can bypass the swamp monster. They may seem like they can hit you with the top of their hands, but thankfully they won't be able to hit you while you're moving on that platform. Stay on the top platforms, grabbing the cross near the end of it to defeat the enemies, and then move on through that area. Our next area, though, is no platform, so we have to actually jump a little bit through the swamp. Take out any of the swamp monsters in front of you. Thankfully, we get another cross to take out that bat that was slowly closing in, before we were able to reach the door and move on past the next area of swamp. Here, take out that skeleton with the whip, and you can actually bypass these skeletons. Jump quickly over to